Okay. Why don't we get started? Sorry for the late start. Again, I'm Erik Olson. I was the Planning Committee Chair for this workshop, and I wanted to talk a little bit thematically about what we discussed yesterday in setting up for several excellent speakers this morning. I viewed this as a very productive discussion yesterday. I think that we had quite a few common themes throughout the discussion, and I just wanted to identify a few of the thematic outcomes that I heard. First, the challenge. The challenge is that there truly are both nutritional questions and issues with obesity and malnutrition domestically and globally, but there are also very real challenges environmentally, constraints environmentally. We heard about climate challenges with impacts that will influence where crops can be grown, that will influence production, could influence prices. We heard about conversion efficiencies that are available, but we also heard about some of the challenges with overfishing and overproduction, or lack of availability of some species. We heard about water and air impacts of some of our agricultural production, pesticide and fertilizer use, and we heard about antibiotics and antibiotic resistance. We also heard about the need for really taking a hard look at where the data gaps are and where the research needs are. But I think that what I found inspiring about yesterday's discussion was that there was a seeming convergence on several issues. And I really do feel that if you listen to everyone that spoke yesterday, from Robert Burns with Grocery Manufacturers Association, to Cynthia Jones, who talked about our fisheries, to Marty Heller, who talked about some of the data that and how we can crunch that data in a life cycle assessment, to Kathleen Merrigan's keynote, and Park Wildy's and many other speakers. I really did feel like there is a vision that starts to emerge from these conversations where we really can not only break down the silos, but really have a common purpose and a common vision. And what I heard was 5 potentially clear aspects to that vision. One is that obviously there is the need for healthy food. And that can mean, obviously, the plate that USDA has put forward, but it also ensures that we are getting the micronutrients that we need, as well as, obviously, the omega-3s and some of the fatty acids and other key nutrients that we really need. The second aspect of this is the need for economic returns for agriculture. For domestic agriculture in particular, we heard an eloquent plea really from Kathleen Merrigan for considering the needs of the farmers, the small and medium-sized farmers who are struggling. And thirdly, we heard about the need for access, particularly for lower income Americans. We heard quite a bit from a variety of speakers yesterday about ways that we can encourage access to the healthy foods, ranging from some of the summaries that we heard from Derek Yack and from Emily Cassidy about incentives that can be created. We heard about how SNAP and the WIC programs can move us towards healthier foods for the lower income Americans. The fourth issue that I heard come up repeatedly is the need for a clear definition and clear agreement on how we go forward with environmentally sustainable food supply. And this means not just greenhouse gases and climate, water and air, land protection, as we heard from Christian Peters and others, not overfishing and overuse. Perhaps aquaculture can play a role in that, and potentially improved approaches to domestic animal agricultural production, some of which can be far more efficient, as we heard yesterday, than what's going on in many other countries. But also clearly a need for biodiversity to be embedded in that whole vision. Both biodiversity of the crops, the wide array of crops that we heard about. I learned quite a bit yesterday from Dr. Burlingame talking about just the amazing variety of certain crops, thousands of specific varieties of rice, for example, just in Thailand, and bananas that have different nutritional values. I mean, I think that the biodiversity of the crops as well as of the ecosystem is critical to this vision. And in addition, I think obviously some kind of look at our meat supply. And I found it fascinating to hear about the enormous differences between conversion factors and between the efficiencies of different types of meat that can have profoundly different impacts on the environment. So you can have meat in your diet without necessarily having the same impact depending on what your selections are. The fifth and final area that I heard is that we really need to also, as part of this vision, think about food that people actually want to eat. And I found it also interesting to hear the different speakers who identified different ways that we can move in that direction. From Kathleen Merrigan talking about farm to school and SNAP education and other ways that we can educate people on what to eat and to encourage them to open their minds to what they might eat. We heard from several other speakers, including our chef speaker, about how we can introduce people to new types of fish and to new types of food that they might not have otherwise eaten, and they'll learn to like it. And we also heard a lot about how we need to avoid food waste and that there is a recurring problem across the board in waste from the production all the way up to the plate and into the trash can. And the question is, how do we move away from the overwhelming amount of waste that is built into our system? So what I heard, I'm actually encouraged by the discussion, these 5 points: that we need healthy food, that we need an economic return for our farmers, we need access for lower income people, we need environmentally sustainable food supply, and we need to make sure that people are actually eating and not throwing away the food, the healthy food. I think those basic concepts really did come through to me fairly clearly, and I do feel like there were some very interesting undergirding themes that supported those, and one of Christian Peters' points really sticks in my mind from yesterday. He spoke of the ethical synergy in some cases where you have the opportunity to both improve environmental protection and improve our nutrition. Examples included eating more legumes and less sugar. And then he challenged us with some of the ethical dilemmas, such as the recommendations for increased fish and increased lean meat consumption that have been put forward by some of the nutritionists, and how do we deal with that when there are environmental challenges associated with moving in that direction. So I do feel that there are positives. We heard from Dr. Burlingame and we heard from other speakers about folks that have tried to define sustainable food supply in a way that's sweeping and that includes the availability of healthy food as well as considering the environmental sustainability. It seems like there is a convergence of interests from industry as well as academics and others that spoke yesterday about moving in that direction. So I look forward to hearing more about these themes today. I want to turn over the podium now to Dr. Gail Feenstra, who's with the University of California at Davis, for a panel that looks really interesting and exciting to talk about options and approaches to enable sustainable food choices. So, Gail?